Anyway, we can't continue.
You may be running or not now.
Good evening. I'm Jerry McIntosh, and this is Community Conversation. Tonight's topic, Fredrick Douglas asked a great question. What is the 4th of July to the slave? To the slave, what is the 4th of July? We're going to address that in other topics this evening. But first, we'll go to our host, Mr. Bill Snow, who is author of the great book, From the Projects to the Boardroom. Also, Mr. Vernon Watson, who is the owner of WBQT TV, where this is being shown, simulcast to YouTube channel, Roku, and also Fire Stick. We have Carol McIntosh, who is the former educator, administrator, and also now president of the Progressive Black Women. Carol, we're gonna get right into it.
Hello, everyone. It's I'm glad to be back, but this is Community Conversations. And if you have anything that you want us to talk about tonight in regards to the community, to empower the community or give the community information, please let us know. Come on Facebook Live, call us up. The number is 850-206-3776. Join in on the conversation and give us your opinion and let us hear your voice. Hello, Derek. How are you doing? Derek Scott?
I'm quite well. How is everybody this evening?
Hey, Brother Derek.
Oh, glad to see you.
Hello.
But tomorrow is the 4th of July. All right, and everybody tell me what you're going to do for the 4th of July before we discuss the real meaning of the 4th of July and what's going on. Did y'all plan anything? Anybody barbecuing?
Not me. That's a trick question.
Well, how's that a trick question?
Because everyone on this panel knows that we've already celebrated ours Juneteenth. So we just taking the paid holiday off of work, but other than that, we know better.
Well, I want to ask our Facebook listeners, or if anyone wants to call in, tell us what you're doing on the 4th of July, and if you celebrate the 4th of July. Let's get into that. That's our main topic, and since tomorrow is the 4th, tell me if anyone knows anything. I just want to know what you all know about the 4th of July as the host of this show.
Well, I know.
Bill?
Well, I know that in 1776, the United States so-called found their independence from Great Britain. We used to fall under their rulership, and also in 1776, America supposedly found their independence and broke free away from Great Britain's rule, and that's what I think it represents to the Americans that are free.
Okay, and talk a little bit about Blacks and the 4th of July, Jerry.
Yeah, the 4th of July. That's why Fredrick Douglass asked that great question: what is the 4th of July to the slave? Because people were, it was so-called independent. Well, it was independent for white people, but it wasn't independent for Black people, because Black people in 1776 were still in slavery. Doing the bidding of building this country for centuries, even after that. So, yeah, the 4th of July had just what it was, independent for somebody else, but it was never independence for us, even to this day, because it don't represent what we were. It don't represent us as equally in the country overall as well to this day, because it still got slaves, because the prisons are full of Black people. You almost got as many Black people in prison now through the the compromise of the 13th Amendment as you did when slavery was in existence. And so Fredrick Douglass was right on time when he said it is merely bombast, that did you call me here to insult me?
Yeah, you know, you're mocking him.
Yeah.
Okay, I got a speech for you, but you ain't gonna like it.
Yeah, that's what he was saying in essence. But they ain't saying when at the end of the speech that everybody he got a standing ovation and people cheered because they knew what he was saying was true. And the thing about it, that's where the power lies, within the truth of what he was saying. And even at that time, to be bold enough to say it.
Absolutely.
When people were still after you to try to put you back into slavery, was awesome.
It's remarkable, amazing, and inspiring to know that a man born a slave that won his freedom was bold enough in 1770. Man, when I listened to that speech, as eloquently, he insulted America so eloquently.
Yeah.
But the words that he spoke, you know what? He was probably so intelligent that his insult went over their heads.
He was.
He was so eloquent and it was full of insults because he felt insulted and felt mocked for them to even ask him to speak on a day that represented so much to them. He even went back to their Constitution and called them on what was written in their Constitution. Then and went as far as discussing all of the degradation that the Black man was subjected to, and to even question whether we were humans. He talked about in that speech. It was just we got people right here in 2022 that will not say a fraction, can't even think to fix their lips to speak against massa. The way this brother did all those years ago, simply remarkable.
I want to read I have some of his words, if y'all don't mind me reading it, then we can discuss it later. He reminds me a little bit of his words. I can see a little profanity might have been put all up in there. It reminds me of Vernon, if you listen to his words, what he might have said. Just put a little something in there in the middle of it.
Something in the
But
mix.
he says, to him, your celebration is a sham. Your boasted liberty is unholy license. Your national greatness, swelling vanity. Your sound of rejoicings are empty and heartless. Your denunciation of tyrants, brass-fronted, impudent. Your shout of liberty and equality, hollow mockery. Your prayers and hymns, your sermons and thanksgivings, with all your religious parade and solemnity are to him mere bombast, fraud, deception, what's that, impiety and hypocrisy, a thin veil to cover up crimes which would disgrace a nation of savages. There is not a nation on the earth guilty of practices more shocking and bloody than are the people of the United States at this very hour. So like Bill said, the words are just right in your face, and these are strong words for someone to say in 1776.
No, in 1862.
76 years after 1776, yes.
Right. Yeah. Now, but the thing about it, they asked him not to come July 4th, but July 5th. And Derek, do you know why they did that?
What was your question? Why they asked him to come July 5th, not the 4th?
Yeah, because because of the fact that July 4th, the whites didn't want the blacks to celebrate the 4th of July with them. You know that, don't you? At the very beginning, they fought against that because there were two different ideals or targets. The blacks was targeting what was that crime?
Well, they wanted to. They were more a celebration of.
Oh, they were celebrating slavery and racism,
Mhm.
and it says that the whites were celebrating freedom and justice. So it really was a conflict there,
Mhm.
and so they really fought. That the whites didn't want them to celebrate on the 4th of July. So that's why the speech was on the 5th. The next day, that's when blacks really celebrated during that time way back there. Ronnie, what do you have to say about it?
Well,
Mhm.
I was trying to see if I could find that, and I couldn't find my phone quick enough. But I was going to see if I can find those that I'm sure YouTube got the actual speech that somebody narrated
Yeah,
for
James
Frederick
Earl
Douglas.
Jones.
That would have been great to show, but I had to look for it, and I said right on, my brother. He was right on. I think that at the time that he gave it, people, what could they say? Truth is the truth,
Mhm.
and it just it just what it is. It is what it is. So it just is that people don't agree with it and may not agree with it. And even when you talk to black folks about this, they sometimes get not a little intimidated, sometimes a lot intimidated about even having to defend the truth. And and it's just like it is today, the truth matters, but apparently to some folks it doesn't matter, and they're trying to circumvent the truth with lies.
Well,
And
we have to remember, Brother Vernon, that the truth, or the First Amendment, should I say, never really applied to us, but to think that
Right.
400 years ago, you had a black man speaking truth to the establishment, the bureaucracy, and power to speak those words when you got Negroes here in 2022 that dare speak the truth.
I think though, you're right. You're right, but I think that during the time that he gave the speech, probably was what, after doing Reconstruction, when the time he actually did that speech.
No. He gave it in 1862 before the Civil War.
Before the
Right.
Civil War. Okay.
1852. It was 1852.
52, yeah,
1852.
Yeah,
Okay.
before the Civil War. Yeah, 10 years before the Civil War.
Yeah.
Yeah, he gave that speech during that time when he could have easily been put back into slavery
Yes, yes.
Right.
because they were tracking people. He had went to England so he could get freed, so he could buy his freedom, and he stayed over there and he lectured over there in England to the point that the people was giving him helped him to raise money and everything else so people could go slavery could end within the United States. So Frederick Douglass was an awesome brother.
Awesome abolitionist, yes.
Well, there were others that was just as bold though. When you read that book on Frederick Douglass, there was others just as bold.
They were more bold then than we are now.
Yeah. They had, but all the way back then, there was always a difference in opinion. I mean, different thoughts on how to get to the freedom component of it. But because Frederick Douglass at one time was working with Garrison, who owned the newspaper. And it was other blacks that was working with the newspaper who was abolitionists also. But they differed with Frederick Douglass.
Right.
And, Garrison differed with Frederick Douglass. So when Douglass moved to New York, he started his own paper.
Right.
And started his own paper so he could get his message out. But there were still other blacks who had differences with him on how to best get people freed out of slavery. But Frederick Douglass was like, "No, we ain't gonna be doing no half, no,
He was like,
we going all in,
there.
And the thing about what Frederick Douglass had overcame was what the same thing Martin Luther King overcame, the fear of death.
Right.
See, when you overcome the fear of death, you can move.
Yes.
And, because at any time you could be killed. So, you're going to do everything you can in that time you have, in the space you have to get things done.
Absolutely.
Fortunately, he lived to a long time. He lived to, until he died. But he was still fighting even when he died, before his death.
But like Bill was stating, this man was so outspoken during that time. Do you think, with us even discussing about the 4th of July and its beginnings and its origin to Black America, do you think that they think you shouldn't do that? Or is it wrong to you have some Blacks say, well, why should we talk about that? 4th of July is 4th of July. But we're in this phase now. I think that we need to know exactly the origins of everything. Everything has a beginning, and you need to know where it began. And I think it's important.
That's what makes our show so great, Miss Carol, is we talk about hard issues and they matter, regardless of the Blacks that don't think that we should touch on a lot of the issues that we do. It doesn't matter what they think. That's what the problem is with America. No one wants to have the hard conversation.
Right.
And unless we get them on the table, the issues and the history and our greats such as Fredrick Douglass, and talk about it and break it down and go into it in detail, we're just going to continue to walk around thinking that we were no more than slaves. But to talk about it and these conversations, that's what the name of the show is, Community Conversation, and our voices, and let's talk. So that's what we're here for, to bring these issues to the forefront, the subject that no one wants to talk about, and everyone is entitled to an opinion, which is why we post the phone number. Look, give it. You don't have to agree with us. That's what makes us great. We are different, and we reserve the right to disagree. But we will continue to talk about these kind of issues and subjects, because these are our voices, and we need to have community conversations about things such as Fredrick Douglass and 1776, so-called independence.
Our Independent Day that we celebrate is now Juneteenth.
I agree.
So why did it take so long for Blacks to really get into June 19th? Why did it take so long? Because we just really, I'm talking about Black America, just really have begun to embrace it. It's been going on for a while, but I mean, overall.
Because of people like you two and folk that have kept the memory alive for all of those years. Imagine 50, 60 years ago, they would have said, okay, well, what the heck? Ain't nobody paying us no attention. Let's just stop the celebrating and just go with the 4th of July. But those people had the determination and the perseverance to keep it. Look, I was a collector, a bill collector in Mobile, Alabama, 1993. I was over in a place called Plateau, which is up of Highway 43. And I saw the African colors and this Juneteenth banner, and I'm like, what in the world is Juneteenth? Now, I've gone through 25, 30 years of, 12, 13 years of schooling, military, the whole nine, and had oblivious to a Juneteenth. So, I mean, determined people that refuse to let the culture and the heritage die, or people like you two that are sitting on this panel that came up with this talk show, then Vernon Watson to get on board and make sure we go to every living room in the Southeast region. That's what it's all about. And we have to keep on keeping on. And if each one continue like Shirley Baker in North Carolina, I always say, if each one of us continue to reach one, that's the key.
I personally think that Juneteenth, it took a long time because it wasn't talked about, nor was it discussed, or wasn't taught. When I look at my educational experience, even going through the University of Florida, I spent all of my time, I can tell you, we celebrated, and particularly in the Black community at the University of Florida, being so small and far and few between, we celebrated all of the cultural traditions. We were big with the principles of Kwanzaa. I'd never heard of Juneteenth until I moved to New York City in 2003. So it wasn't something that we discussed, and even within our Black Student Union and our Institute of Black Culture, I'd never heard of it. We had never done anything. None of the Divine Nine organizations did anything regarding Juneteenth as a celebration back then when I was in school, in undergrad, and certainly not in high school. It wasn't something that was taught. And, I think it's, I won't say catching on, but it's becoming a topic of conversation in latter years. And in particularly, you juxtapose it to all the loss of life that Black men have suffered or endured within this last decade, and then talk about whether we truly are free. It opens the conversation around Juneteenth, and I think that's why we're getting a little bit more notoriety around the topic than we have in the past.
Well, for centuries after, as in 1865, when the people was free, they started the celebration back then. And it's been celebrated in Texas for years. Even I can't think of the two people that used to do it here.
Linda Thompson,
right?
Linda Thompson, her husband, Jerry.
Right.
Linda, her husband, the first one that tried to expose it here.
Yeah, but it never
really caught on the way it should, because it would be a few people come to Juneteenth, and she had young ladies and young boys celebrating, doing the reciting poems and poetry and all of that, but it never caught on to. But it was a sister that's I think she's around 90 years old now, that she had fought and walked for years to get it to become a national holiday. And only this past year did it become a national holiday. And a federal holiday. And it because of her. All fighting, but most people don't even know who she is.
That's it.
I can't even think of her name right now, but I had her name and everything.
Go ahead, I'm sorry, bro.
Go ahead, I'm good.
Well, we got Johnny Lowe on our Facebook stream saying we celebrate July 2nd as well for the signing of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, but Author Gloria Wood weighs in with, when I was in school, it was never taught or discussed, and I graduated in 1978. She said, speaking of Juneteenth, Johnny Lowe comes back and says the act outlaws segregation in business such as theater, restaurants, and hotels. It banned discrimination practices in employment and ended segregation in public schools such as swimming pools, libraries, and public schools. But Shirley Baker, which is a faithful viewer of ours, weighs in from North Carolina with the right of self-determination, international covenant on civil and political rights. Each one teach one, from civil rights to human rights, universal declaration. We have Brother Arthur Mitchell, who says he's enjoying the conversation, and my lovely daughter, Christmas Brittany Stowe, says, good evening, everyone.
Good evening, Brittany.
Karen.
Bernard.
Yes, on the Juneteenth thing, one of the reasons that it was only considered a local Texas tradition, even a holiday, anything like that. In tradition, I didn't hear about it until it was in the mid 70s when I heard about it. I was in the United States Air Force Reserve, and I was a personnel officer. And the first time I heard about it was that we had an incident I had to investigate, that they were celebrating this event called Juneteenth, and one of the military guys, white guy, thought it was cute to put a hood on it and ride his motorcycle through the event. So that was about my first awareness to Juneteenth, and then I learned a lot since. And one of the things that I could say, I went to a lot of schools in the military on race relations. I attended the race relations institute that the government had down in Cocoa Beach, Florida, and I attended the Economic Opportunity Management Institute as well. And they taught us a lot of stuff about Black history and stuff like that. But to my knowledge, I never did hear about Juneteenth. And then in my knowledge came up when I had to do the investigation about Juneteenth holiday. Now, one of the things, like I said before, we're going to give Linda Thompson there a credit for, they was the first one, to my knowledge, to bring Juneteenth towards to the Pensacola area, and it didn't hardly catch on either then. But now it is a holiday. Since I got the mic here, let me go back. You was talking about defending when Fredrick Douglass was there and defending his issues here. Okay, one of the things I do want to mention, you know, in his history, I did a little study on Fredrick Douglass. He gave another significant speech back in 1841 that he addressed the church, you know, and he was trying to not get the churches. It was a prominent speech. He said that the churches, they were using the church to defend racism, to defend slavery. And so he gave a great speech back then. He called the church in prejudice, and where he kind of condemned and criticized the preachers who used the Bible to support, to justify slavery. And so he was a brave man. And let me tell you, we're talking about history and the unsung stuff in history. Fredrick Douglass is probably one of the most unsung heroes.
Yes, I agree with that.
Black history as well, because he led the fight. He led the way for everybody else to come in his path, you know, including Dr. King and all those folks. Okay,
you're right.
Most definitely, I agree with that.
Well, one of the Facebook viewers stated that they never heard about June 19th or Juneteenth in schools. So whose responsibility was it to teach
Carol,
information? Hold on a second. Whose responsibility was it to teach it? And was it the community or was it the school? Because
Carol, you're a teacher. Let me bump in here for a minute. Carol, you're a teacher, and you know that whose responsibility it was.
Yes,
it's the school system. It's the school system responsibility to teach it, but it never taught it. Well, hold on for a minute. It's just like the curriculum of Black history. Okay, it was a long, hard fight to get Black history even into some of the school systems. Okay, and then even when we did decide to get it in there, guess what? It was completely optional. And it was treated so differently from mainstream history, what they call mainstream history, that a lot of folks still didn't get a chance to. When I was in college, one of the things I regret in college, I took my twin sister took a course in high school and in college in Black history. Well, I didn't do that, but I regret it not doing it now. In retrospect, I regret it. Because, but they was all optional courses, and she decided that she's going to take those courses, and I learned a lot from her with that. So I think, I guess it's everybody's responsibility if you really want to know the truth about it. It's all about responsibility. But I kind of think that this government and the school system has more responsibility if they're going to teach history and going to teach our kids about history. I think they should be held accountable for that.
Well, I would say this, in this day and time, since the system don't teach it, then it's up to us to make sure that our children get the knowledge. Now, in the beginning, when the books was written, it should have been a part of the history of America in the history book, but it wasn't.
No,
and it never will be, because it's up to us now to define, because people, for one thing, you got to teach Black history with a feeling. Right. It's got to come from somewhere much deeper than what the surface stuff that they would teach. Because you teach what you don't know.
Right, they don't know. Like 95% of the teachers in the school systems are white. They don't know real Black history. They're not going to teach June 19th. They're not going to teach about slavery. They're not going to teach all of that.
No, because for one thing, it's against everything that they believe.
Right.
One thing. And so we have to teach our children. But I will say always that we have to teach the younger generations and the young children, so they will know how to defend themselves against the onslaught that's sure to come in their lives against from white supremacists all over the world.
Absolutely.
And we're not just isolated here. from our history, but it is even more on the continent of Africa.
Right.
I was talking to a brother in Atlanta. He said, it was stuff that they didn't learn for years over there about their own people, about the leaders of the continent, like Nkrumah and all of the rest of the brothers and sisters that fought during that time, how they was brainwashed so bad against the Mau Mau, who was fighting to liberate Black people, but the Black people was just as much against them as the whites in many instances, because they talked about how cruel because they brainwashed people into believe that the Mau Mau was the cruel people and they was the righteous one. It's just like right now, when you talk about violence in the country, you're talking about a violence against a people, which was us. We've been so violently beat down that sometimes we believe that it is us that's violent.
Right.
It's state violence, state-sponsored violence, like the young brother in Akron, Ohio, that was shot 60 times. And the thing about it, we have to teach that. We have to change that narrative, and that's why we are doing what we're doing, because we got to change the narrative.
Wow,
we have to take back the narrative on history. See, we were taught lies all our lives to fill our head with the belief in only whiteness.
Right.
But we got to re-educate ourselves. We got to reinvent the knowledge that has been taken from us in some kind of way, introduce that knowledge to others, because we've been indoctrinated with a racist, white supremacist attitude that have been alive for so long.
Let me read Author Gloria Wood's comment, because it falls in what Jerry was saying. When she said, my mother was a teacher. She didn't tell me anything about Juneteenth either. Maybe she was unaware of it too.
Right.
Something like we said, or I'll go back to Vernon, he just said both, and that maybe the school, it might have been their responsibility, but they weren't going to teach it, because they're going to teach the 4th of July. They're going to teach it from their viewpoint, from their narrative. And then the community, if you knew they were going to get it from the school system, the community, I think more so than anything, should have been teaching young children. We should have had schools, do you like to teach Saturday schools like we had earlier, but schools that taught Black history in our community.
Absolutely, because I think the community is the one that educated me back in 1993.
Right, and they used to have freedom schools, and they actually, back in the time, they would have schools that taught Black history and taught the young people about their heritage in the churches back then.
Right. And
then you had the elders that you sat down in the foot of the elders, and the elders would give you the history and tell you about different things.
Well,
that's when you learn true history.
Let me say this. They slaughtered people for teaching the true history. The Black Panther Party was teaching the history. The Nation of Islam was teaching the history. Malcolm X and Minister Farrakhan, all of them Minister is still teaching the history. The people, Martin Luther King then was trying to get the history out, telling people that we were here before the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution.
Right.
They were teaching history as the Civil Rights Movement was taking place. There was a movement of people during the period of the 60s and 70s, even into the early 80s, that was teaching the history of our people.
Right.
After that, we got so comfortable that we didn't feel like, we didn't want to learn about ourselves, because history became an elective in college rather than credited subject matter, if you will. So, and then the teachers can't teach what they don't know. It was many Black teachers. You can ask Black teachers right to this day, what was June? When did you learn about Juneteenth? What did you learn about the Middle Passage? What did you learn about the slave ships and all of that? What have you learned that you haven't read for yourself? Because you didn't get it in school if you know it.
But you have to realize, being educated, you have a curriculum. You have the book that they get, that the students have, and the history part of it is in that curriculum. And they're nowhere in, especially elementary and middle school and high school. Nowhere in there was there a Black history segment. The only time you had the Black history courses was in college, and like Vernon said, they were electives.
Right.
That was the only time. So even now, tell me where. Give me a name of locations, organizations, or people that are teaching Black history right now to our young people. The true history, not
a watered down.
Tell me where's one? Except our community conversation, our voices. Give me an
While the panel is coming up with an answer, let me go with what Nathan G. Weathers says on our Facebook stream. He says, we were taught not to talk about our true Black history all over the USA. We got to remember that why we didn't hear about a lot of things that we needed to know about. So don't stop, because we are learning more. We are Nathan G. Learning Center. Thank you for what y'all are doing today. Thank you, he says. Nathan G. Weathers on our Facebook stream.
I want to thank Brother Weathers too, because he's been doing a great job at teaching. And
we need him on the show. We need him on the show.
We'd love to have him on, because he got a great
tell
program.
Us what he's doing.
Samuel Clark said today's teacher was trained by the white supremacist educational system. Either don't know or are ashamed of it and waiting on white people to, in other words, say it's safe and to play or to teach it.
They could not teach it, and they still can't teach it in the schools because there is a curriculum. The teachers can't go off that curriculum. That's what you have to understand. And in that curriculum, there is nothing that's going to teach you the true history of Black people. So we need to get off of that right now, talking about Black history taught in the schools.
Right.
Yeah. See, the thing about it, what they have done is played us in the system. They haven't even gave you the medium information so that you would go out and find the rest of it if you can. But see, the curriculum can be added, but they won't add it. It can be added because if you can learn, but I know it. That's what I'm saying. I'm saying they can, because if you can add white supremacy history, you can definitely add the other history to it. But the people that would be teaching it would teach it so it wouldn't benefit you. It wouldn't even be watered down. It would be against you. You know.
And so we should not even consider that. Personally, I think we need to stop saying about our kids been taught history, Black history in schools. That need to be just off the table, because it's not going to happen.
But that's what he was saying. He said that the white supremacy educational system either don't know that, I'm talking about some Black teachers, were trained, he said they were trained by the white supremacy educational system. What he's saying is they don't know either.
Well, that's
I'm talking about Black teachers. They don't know either.
Yeah, right.
That's what Ms. Carroll said.
Because the curriculum is based on white America.
Right.
It's always in the West.
Exactly.
Why do you think they have CRT right now? And it won't be taught. It's got to be taught in our communities.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
And it's not being taught in the community. We're saying, let somebody else teach it. We have to teach it.
We have to do a better job. Johnny Lowe on our paper stream said we suffer from post-traumatic slave syndrome. Samuel X weighs in with, many are learning about Juneteenth, what their former slave masters' children allow or educate them to teach, just as they outline what parts of the Bible are preaching. They are capitalizing of it at the same time. Sister Arthur Gloria Woods come back and say, what about the Black church? Could not we implement it in the Black churches?
Absolutely. That's my point. Let's try to find churches, other places, or nonprofits, someone to start teaching Black history studies in our Black community. Stop waiting on, what did we say earlier we were going to do? Stop waiting on other people to have our narratives. Let's have our own narrative.
Control our own narrative.
But another question I want to ask, are we afraid now white backlash because we're now pushing away 4th of July and heading toward June 19th, are we then going to have backlash from the white community?
No, because it's up to you to make a determination whether you're going to celebrate you or you're going to celebrate them. And I prefer celebrating me if I'm going to celebrate something. But I think the celebration should be talking about reparation,
If we
addressing the history of our people, addressing slavery, addressing before we left Africa, the Middle Passage, the Civil Rights Movement, Jim Crow era, the whole gamut. That's what we should be talking about on Juneteenth, not partying.
well, it could be a part.
You can be a part. Yeah,
But
it can be a
there's
small
got to-
part of it, but it has to. I mean, the celebration could be a mixture of plays and acting acting out the programs that took place during that period. That would be a celebration where they can learn something from it rather than just eating, drinking, and partying from it.
Right.
Because that's all Martin Luther King Day has turned to in many instances. And it's sad that we are not learning anything from that day. And it's not the fault of everybody. It's the fault of all of us. Yeah, I can say it is. It's all of our fault if we are not teaching our children and teaching the next generation and teaching each other, because there's so many of us don't know.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
And that's why we need to start trying to galvanize and organize. Shirley Baker, what's that? Samuel X, Nathan, all of us need to get together and talk about how we can begin to have different Black history educational programs in our communities, because it's not going to happen with the onset of DeSantis and other governors with the CRT. They're taking the history away. So we've got to take it into our hands and in our communities and teach the history ourselves, is what I'm saying. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Johnny Lowe on the paper says that's why he loves the internet. Knowledge is at our fingertips, and I share that information with my children daily.
Yeah.
But there's no excuse today to be in the dark or blind or not know. It's just no excuse.
No.
Well,
Yeah.
What you have to know is people have to know what they're looking for. They have to start somewhere, and a lot of times people don't know how to navigate what they are looking for. But like you say, it's at the fingertip. You can ask your phone, even if you can't type in what you want, but you can ask the phone for certain things, and it'll take you to so many places. Or ask your computer. It will take you to many places out there where the knowledge is at, where a whole lot of African Americans are doing the same thing we're doing. But they are professors and doctors and everybody that are talking about a lot of issues that we are addressing today.
Yeah. I and some of the research I did, it says there are other celebrational ideas of independence on other days. You know that. In 1808, Black people in the United States began celebrating January 1st when the U.S. banned the transatlantic slave trade.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know that. Black New Yorkers used July 5th to mark the day New York's gradual emancipation law took effect in 1827. Didn't know that. August 1st also became a holiday in 1834 when Great Britain abolished enslavement. Those are holidays that were in the past. I guess they are not celebrated now, of course, but there were holidays that we weren't aware of, and they've gone away. Bernie, you're too quiet. What's up?
Okay, I'm listening.
Yeah, I was gonna say Fredrick Douglas did another speech also when he talked about if there's no struggle, there's no progress.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
You know, he went on to say, and people always cut it off at that. He said, you might have to use words or blows or both to free yourself. They don't like to use that part where he said blows. You know, you know, you know. He said, you know, a man that wants to be free, he, you know, and disappreciate, you know, doing what it takes. He says, it's like he want the fields to be planted without planting them up. He said, you know, he want the ocean without its awful road. He said, but there's no struggle, there's no progress. So we have to understand that there's in anything, there's work to do. And there's power in it once you succeed in that work. And it's
Right.
easy as it don't come like a microwave oven. You know, the civil rights movement started way back way back before Martin Luther King started
Yes.
protesting and others. It started way back there with Marcus Garvey's and others, but it culminated to a point in '63, and then '65, and you know, '64. But that was legislation that we should have made sure, like the Voting Rights Act, the Fair Housing, and all of that should have stayed intact.
Well, you know, I just want to take a moment and kind of address something. And I wanted you, Ms. McIntosh, if you don't mind repeating the last holiday. I think you said Great Britain abolished slavery. Did you say 1834?
It says 1834, August 1st is celebrated as a holiday in 1834 when Great Britain abolished enslavement.
Yes. So I want to take a step back because, you know, we've been talking around and we've gotten to Juneteenth and we've gotten to, you know, whether or not we celebrate the 4th of July. You know, the big picture is you can't celebrate a holiday for a country whose independence did not include you as an individual. That makes no sense. But, you know, to go back to the bigger, broader thing, I want to take a back when we talk about making sure that we teach and understand and people know the true history of we as Black people, and then also we as a country, we understand why we got into why that the United States tried to declare their independence from Great Britain. And we talk about, you know, what's taught in elementary schools, is taught in for all your life. All you hear is no taxation without representation. And we talk about the Boston Tea Party and how that was a catalyst. And then Paul Revere came to rise, the British are coming, and all that stuff. That has nothing to do with anything. If we go back to it, if we go back to your true studies, we talked about the premise of the colonies not having representation. That's not accurate. The 13 colonies, along with all the other British Commonwealth colonies across the world, all had representation. What they did not have was high court representation. Why that mattered is because in 1872, I forget the gentleman's name. I don't want to call him whatever their version of the Supreme Court justice would be, declared that they were going to abolish slavery not only in England, but also in all of the British colonies, which included the 13 colonies here in the U.S., as well as those in you know, what we consider to be the Caribbean now. At that point in time, the United States is like, wait, you know, what are you talking about? That means that if you abolish it in not only England, but it's effective in the colonies, that means that slavery was no longer going to be allowed in the 13 colonies. So this all goes back to slavery. So then you want to talk about they built their independence because they wanted to enslave us. When the folks over in Great Britain or in the UK said, no, we're not doing that any longer, they said, oh, yes, we're going to do it. That's where the level of independence comes. And so you almost look at it as the Boston Tea Party and taxation without representation being what was that common euphemism, a Red Robin, so to speak, or a Trojan horse as to why we need to get into this war so that the United States can declare independence. So at the end of the day, they're celebrating their independence from the UK so that they continue the tradition of slavery.
Mm.
And that's not something that we hear about and we talk
Right.
about. You
Really
know, we
great
talk
analogy.
about the narrative is always like, oh, taxation without representation. It has nothing to do with that. So when we talk about educating, we need to talk about education. I don't know if a lot of people, if that's taught. That's something that I learned when I was in undergrad, going through African American studies, but that wasn't something that I knew. Like, I don't think I ever heard being taught like, oh, it had anything to do with slavery. You know, at that level, you know, to that level of the Revolutionary War. So,
Really,
you know, just something to think about.
really great analysis, Brother Derek. Johnny Lowe on our Facebook stream weighs in. What I think our civil rights leaders and other leaders of our communities from the 60s and 70s and so on has compromised our relevance. Dr. King and many others died and fought for freedoms we enjoy today, and we need to constantly remind ourselves of our beginnings so we don't repeat our experience. One shout out to my son-in-law, Brother Vincent Anderson, who is watching as well.
Okay, I'm gonna read this. Black Americans have always populated the celebrations using these moments to reimagine America as a better nation cleansed of slavery and racism. Throughout the 1850s, Black and white abolitionists assembled each July 4th, hoping to use their celebrations to challenge Americans to change. July 4th offered a perfect opportunity to acknowledge the flaws that needed to be eradicated. So they used July 4th when they celebrated as a learning process to tell America, you know, you're talking about freedom, but you know, this is what's going on in America. It's like hypocrisy to Black America. So I don't know if we need to do that on the 4th of July or just say we're not celebrating or what, but we need to go back to what they did in the past and use that time to try to have America reimagine itself.
And America is reimagining itself. Back then, America is reimagining itself to the point that it's turning back the 20th century. And what we are not paying attention to, I don't think enough people are, is the judicial in this country. You got a judicial that's turning over this country and making it, it's a judicial coup that's taking place right now. Hear what I'm saying clearly. A judicial coup that's taking place. Everything that's coming down is to turn over everything that was done. That, you know, and is led by a funny looking Negro named Clarence Thomas.
Uncle Clarence.
Oh, okay.
Uncle Clarence.
He best described as a black supremacist, a black white supremacist.
He's holding up white supremacy in this country.
Right.
And by him,
but it's not just him alone now.
Yeah, right.
Well,
but if he was concerned about Black people in the country, that would be one thing. He's not. He's leading the onslaught against Black people.
Well,
that person has nothing in common with us. Nothing.
Well, if he keep on overturning laws, he's gonna overturn that law that allows him to marry that white lady.
Yeah, you know, loving. Yeah, the loving law.
You think he's gonna overturn that? No. So look at all of the laws that the Supreme Court has overturned. Are you concerned? Are you all any of you concerned about what's happening now?
Well, I don't know that Dred Scott in the late 1800s was clearly the example from the highest court in the land that even though he's a born free man, your Supreme Court stated that Black folk don't have any rights in this country. So there it is.
But this is 2022. So
but
still like
you
that
don't
now?
tell that to that young man who was shot 62 times on this week that this is 2022.
But Vernon?
Yeah, Carol. To go back to your original question, should we be concerned about it? Absolutely. Remember, after Lincoln freed slaves and during Reconstruction, we had all kinds of freedom and made many gains. And it's just Jerry said, the judicial coup that took place was not only with Dred Scott, also but Plessy versus Ferguson versus Plessy in 1896. They just turned everything around and eradicated any gains that Black folks had made just by a stroke of a hammer on the bench, by a few people deciding and that's the problem that I really have. I really do. A few people can determine the fate of a whole nation of people.
Right.
It's just amazing to me.
That's
It's
amazing.
absolutely amazing to me.
Well, you know, and when you think about it, it's 3 equal branches of government.
Should be.
It's supposed to be 3
Yeah, supposed to be.
But what they
Technically,
have given the power to the Supreme Court, the other 2 branches. And that's unfortunate because now you are at the mercy of these clowns. You know, it's 6 of them that's there now. That 3 of them that Trump put on the court. And these people are dead set against any progress in this country. And this is why they are killing abortion right. They tore up the Miranda Act. Now they are putting church and state together. You know, talking about, you know, we can pray. You know, who you know, you can be, you know, in other words, using prayer to indoctrinate people. Not that they are concerned about the spiritual side of people, but they are pretending so they can indoctrinate people under the Christian nationalism, which is one of the most dangerous things in the world, because that's why many people are afraid of people like the Taliban, that women's rights will be destroyed. Everything, you know, women can't even go to school, can't teach and all of that under Taliban law. Well, you got the Christian Taliban right here in America that's more dangerous than they are. And they're using the courts to get what they want.
You know, they always use Christianity to justify everything.
Yeah, that's right.
Like I said, including slavery and everything else, Jerry. So that's no surprise. But going back to your point, we should have 3 equal branches of government, which should hold checks and balances on each other. And in theory, it could work if they allowed it to work. But the problem is the problem is that when the Supreme Court overrules something, the legislative branch of the United States has the ability to overrule the Supreme Court, because they can pass laws to change to overrule that, change that.
Yeah.
But the problem is that you got the same kind of mentality
Right
in the courts that you got in the legislature and in the judicial branch. Now, that's why I take personal issues with the fact that they allow if they're going to have a Supreme Court to decide, have the final last word, okay, then why would they politicize? I mean, why would they politicize it? Why would we need to have a Republican appointees or a Democratic appointee? It seems to me, okay, we should the Supreme Court justices should be just like anybody else. They should be elected by the people of the United States. If we're going to put them in for a lifetime appointment, shouldn't we have to say so in that? But yet we don't. We don't. We just have the power of this country lies in the hands of just a very few people, and it affects all of us. And I just don't see why the America, where we would never be a free country, not completely free country, until there are true checks and balances in the system. Even though how I understand the concept of the electoral college and why they didn't want the general population to elect your representation, your president, because they wanted to have control over it, because they didn't think people smart enough to elect your president. So they wanted to put it in hands. They want to tip the scale a little bit using this the electoral college.
Right.
And then when the electoral college works against them, now they want to tip the scale the other way. So
well, you know, Vern, when you think about the Supreme Court, I don't feel nobody should be there for life.
Yeah.
I don't
Well, I
feel
agree.
about it. You know, no person should be there for life under any circumstance. But the thing about it, when you remember the leak that came out on Roe versus Wade,
Yeah.
and Roberts went crazy. He had the marshals and everybody looking for the leaker because they don't feel they should come under scrutiny. And most of the time, they have never came under scrutiny. Whatever the decision they made, people live with it. But when you're talking about a coup, and they are working with the same people that tried to overthrow the government at January 6th.
Yeah.
The same mentality is on the court.
Well, you know what they're doing now, Jerry?
Huh?
You know what they're doing right now? They even trying to limit the First Amendment right for those people that to protest against them. You know, the people that protesting against them in front of homes and everything.
Yeah.
They're trying to outlaw that.
Yeah. You know, in many states they you know, like, and I think it was Oklahoma where people were protesting in front of the courthouse or the governor's mansion. They were shooting tear gas out the window of the governor's mansions. The same kind of people wouldn't go into the school to get rid of somebody for while they had guns, but peaceful protesters, they were shooting tear gas out the window. When you look at the EPA regulation, the EPA, this has saved many lives in this country. The EPA regulation was helping us to move toward a cleaner society as far as the air we breathe, the water we drink, and all of that. They gutted that. Now these emission people can just dump emissions out into the air. The Clean Water Act is on the docket. And then they got what they call shadow docket, where they can do something, nobody put their name to it, but they can just release it and it's a done deal, and you really don't know what this is about. Now the elections from state legislators is on the docket that could come down at any day because somebody decided, well, we don't want people to determine the outcome of the election. So the state legislators, they want to do it. They want to send people who they want to send. Even if you won a congressional seat, they can say, no, we want this person to be a Congress person.
Right.
So and that's in the courts right now. You know, affirmative action in higher education is in the courts right now. So if this probably will be the end of affirmative action in higher education. Like I said, the Miranda rights and the evidence base, and we talked about that where this came down from the Supreme Court, people. If you got wrongly convicted, like you all have heard of the Innocent Project, where they go and find evidence to prove that you are innocent or if you're still guilty. Well, they are limiting how you can put that evidence into the courts.
The new evidence, yeah.
Yeah, the new evidence. Even though the evidence could be overwhelmingly in your favor, you could be put to death because a state decided, well, I don't want to deal with it.
You didn't appeal it in the 2-year time frame after your conviction.
Right. I mean, this thing is crazy. They're overturning the due process that America has lived by is now about to be overturned. And then when you look at the racist democracies who have looked at the demographics of the country and say, we got to get rid of Roe versus Wade now because there's too many other people up on this planet, up on American soil. So we got to get rid of it. But you can bet your last dollar, if it was just black people that was having abortions, you could go to McDonald's or Wendy's and get an abortion. I'm telling you.
But the abortion problem is not really for all women. They don't care about the black woman. But the abortion mainly is, I think, is to get the white woman back into, like they said, back into the kitchen, back into the homes, and build up the white race, mainly because they said in 2040 or 2050,
Yeah.
people of color will be will outnumber.
It'd be parity.
But
You know,
you don't think you know, Ms. McIntosh. You're absolutely right. I mean, this is the first, going back to the 2020 census, was the first census ever taken that white people did not outnumber people of color. So when you look at it, like to your point, it is a matter of ensuring a supply chain, so to speak, of white babies. That's why Roe versus Wade was overturned. The quickest way, if you ask me, and this is just me simplifying it, the quickest way, and I hate saying it, but I'm gonna say it anyway. You want to get Roe v. Wade reinstated? Tell all these white women to start having black and brown babies and start putting them and raising them in black and brown communities, and they'll put it back up so fast that you won't have a problem.
Hey,
but until that happens, we still gonna be in the same scenario.
Not to go backwards, but Khalid Lewis says power concedes nothing without a demand. Samuel X says no struggle, no progress. So removing the no from both sides of the equation leaves another two statement. Thus struggles equals progress. Mathematical view of Fredrick Douglas, he said, but K-Move Kamal says demand is a way of begging real strongly. If we don't exercise the power, make those demands come to be. Khalid Lewis says demand precedes taking it black. You should stop thinking civil rights and start thinking human rights. K-Move Kamal on our Facebook stream.
Thank you. But thank you. But back to Derek, as far as we're talking about the abortions and white women and building up the white race, that is the main reason why it's happening, the total reason. And they want to take it back to the beginning of the Constitution. You heard the term originalists, because those are people that want to take the country back to the beginning of the Constitution. And who was in control in the beginning of the Constitution? White men. Well, white men.
Can I say this?
White men.
Land owning white men.
Yeah. Can I say this? I think though, it's a little late. I think that was partially the reason for abortions, because of these black and brown babies, because whenever you mix black, white, or anything else, it's not going to be white anymore. And I think it's a little late now for them to think they are able to build up the race, because right now, black folks and brown folks are also going to be having babies. And black folks and brown folks have babies at a higher number rate than white folks, okay? And then you still got those white folks that still going to be able to get their abortions, whereas the brown and black women are not going to be able to get their abortions. So I think it might, if that was the reason, one of the reasons for what they wanted to do, it's going to tremendously backfire on them. I do know, and I feel this, that what we're experiencing today is directly related to the fact that they are afraid that they're going to lose power, and they are. It's just a matter of time. But at one thing, I really take my hat off to them. But they know that they're running a losing race. But what they're doing is they're slowing it down and retaining it as far out as possible. Because at one time, it was projected that this country going to be more minority than majority of about 1830. Now they're saying 2030, but now they're saying 2050 now, about 2050. So therefore, they was able to slow it down significantly, but they're not going to be able to stop it. And so, but I think that was one of the biggest fears that's running this whole issue in this country today, because they're absolutely in fear that white's going to lose power and going to lose control of this country. And that very may be true, but I don't think that's necessarily going to be a bad thing. I think they think it's going to be a bad thing.
They think it's going to be bad.
But I think they're looking back at history, and that's why they don't want folks to start teaching critical race history now, because they think they look back at history that might remind folks that, well, look, when you was in power, look what you did to us. Now that we was in power, maybe we're going to do that to you. I don't think they really realize, Carol and Jerry and my esteemed panelists here, that I don't think that is going to happen. It didn't happen after apartheid in South Africa, and it's not going to happen in America either, because once you're subjected to treatment like that, you don't wish it upon anybody, not even your enemies. And so I think that once this country is controlled by the so-called minority now, I think it's going to just make the country better, because I don't think they're going to treat white folks like white folks treated us. And I think that was the biggest fear of retribution. That's just my 2 cents in it.
Well, Bernard, black folk don't have that gene, that kind of, unfortunately, we are too forgiving. We are the most unforgiving, the most forgiving people on the planet, while others are unforgiving of anything that anybody else do. We don't have that gene, but we've been through the fire.
Well, you know why, Jerry, though? Because they never had to be subjected to the torture that we had to go through. And that's why we're so forgiving, because I don't believe that we want other folks to feel the same thing that we felt. And so therefore you are forgiven. But if you never experienced that, how can you relate? They never had to suffer any consequences behind their actions. So they can't even relate to how it feels to be. That's why we're so forgiving. But I do agree with, I do say this, I think we're too forgiving, if you ask me. Ask where Bill, you my preacher man, what they say about prayer without something is
prayer without work.
Prayer without work.
Like
prayer without work. And so our work is that I think that sometimes that we should have the right to defend ourselves. I think sometimes you have to get down in the mud. I think sometimes you have to fight fire with fire. And I don't think that everything that happened in this country to us, we're gonna go pray and march. Okay, it's just like that. What they say after every gun shooting in this country, prayers and whatever. What they call
thoughts and prayers.
Thoughts and prayers. Thoughts and prayers. Now, when it happened to black folks, it's just prayers, peaceful and none prayers and none. And non-violent stuff.
Non-violent stuff.
They tell you, let's be peaceful in our protest.
Yeah.
Let's not be violent, but you have committed a violent act to cause that protest.
Yeah.
That's the danger of this thing.
I want to caution y'all, and people might not accept what I'm saying, but this is my estimation, okay? I do believe, based on what I saw in my lifetime, and I'm just going to start with the 10 years history between 1955 from the Montgomery bus boycott until the Voting Rights Act in 1965. We had 10 full years of peaceful, non-violent, peaceful marching and getting our ass whooped and everything. Okay, not much happened. Not very much happened in those 10 years. I want to contrast that with what happened subsequent to the next 3 years, in 1966, 1967, and 1965, 66, and 67, when the riots, when we had riot season, when we start taking matters in our own hands and fighting back, stuff changed. After 1968, you begin to see a lot of stuff change now. Okay, and so I contributed part of it to that, because we began to see that we just not going to sit down and take this stuff anymore. Right. And so they was afraid that we do something. So we got some gains as a result of that. Now, I'm not discounting the fact that all the 10 years that Dr. King and all the folks did all the marching, a lot of that was factored into that. But you just can't ignore those 3 years of riots and say that they just riding and it didn't result in anything. It resulted into a lot of things when they had that commission. I forgot what the name of the commission, but they wanted
the Kerner Commission.
The Kerner Commission, exactly right. And so, but it did lead to some gains in the 70s and the 80s, but they began to be eroded today. Mm-hmm. So that's what I'm saying is that we just can't be peaceful on every damn thing. We're gonna have to take some action with some of this stuff.
Well, K. Mu Kamau on a paper screen said we need to stop trying to reform the system and start thinking in terms of revolution.
Well, you know, one of the things that you know, I like his statement that King was talking about moving towards revolution, but King was also, he was talking about the spreading the pain. King was. He was saying, you know, don't buy, you know, at that time, Seal Test milk, Wonder Bread, and all that. That's what was taking place in Memphis, where they had these different companies. He was saying, now let's spread the pain around. Let's not buy. Let's not go out there and spend our money with these people who are supporting this kind of attitude. And that's what we have been doing. We have been paying people to discriminate against us.
Right.
We still are, Jerry.
That's what I'm saying. We still are. And we were thanked to get in a restaurant where people don't want us to give them our money. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to give them a dime. If they come to the door and say, I don't want you, okay, that's your place, goodbye. I'm going somewhere where, you know, somebody don't mind taking my money.
You're being appreciated. I agree with that, Jerry. You know, one of the things that one thing I believe that white people understand and white people respect, and that's the almighty dollar. When you start hitting them in the pocketbook, okay, then they begin, and that goes back to my whole tale about.
Hold on, Vern.
Sure. Yeah, we can't hear it.
Hold on.
Okay, hold on. Wait a minute. I want them to hear what you're saying. Okay, go ahead.
Turn them up.
I'm trying to turn.
Oh, yeah. Hold on a second, please. No, you have to.
Hey, Carol, the point I was going to try to make while y'all doing with that, you know, when we start boycotting and start hitting them in the pocketbook, just like the Montgomery boycott.
The shit, dude.
Oh,
Jesus Christ.
Now, what were you saying now? We couldn't hear you at first.
let me say what he was saying.
Yeah, I heard.
And he was saying, stop talking about racism, stop talking about slavery, and start, it's over with, go on, stop the S. And that's his opinion. Thank you for your call.
No, and we are never gonna stop talking about that until y'all stop doing what you're doing. That's what we're gonna do. We're gonna continue to. This is our show. This is our narrative. We're gonna tell the truth about what you did. I know you don't want to hear it, and that's on you. But the truth is gonna help set all of us free, or it's gonna cause all our death. So it's best that you listen to what we got to say, because these lies that have been taught to you and me is no longer gonna exist in this country. We're gonna tell the truth about what happened in slavery. We're going to tell the truth about what happened in Jim Crow. We're going to tell the truth about the beatings and the slaughter that took place during slavery. And we're going to talk about the mass incarceration of Black people for no reason in this country for something as little as some marijuana. We're going to talk about that. Because
we're going to talk about the George Floyd.
Yeah, we're going to talk about all that. We're going to talk about what took place the Monday with the guy got shot 60 times. We're going to talk about that. Don't think you can call here and intimidate us. You can't. We will never allow you to intimidate us. And we're not afraid of you.
And we're going to talk about the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act that these racists sitting on the Hill will not pass. When we want accountability from the federal level of law enforcement all the way down to the local level, chokeholds to be done away with and accountable. We're going to talk about them. Brother.
So this is what I said earlier.
I'm sorry, what was the man's name?
He had a little private number.
Okay, but that's what I was talking about earlier. When you start taking on the narrative, then what you have is a backlash from the whites because they want to give you the narrative.
Yeah, they want you not to talk about what we have been talking about for all these months. But we're going to continue to talk about it because these issues have to be addressed now before it's too late.
Okay.
And before we end up in a real race war, because we're not afraid of you and we are not afraid of anybody that sound or talk like you.
But sometimes you have to kind of look at the person that called or try to understand the person that called. He doesn't want to hear. Sometimes they don't want to hear the truth, and sometimes you have a backlash because you don't want to hear it. But he has to hear it. He evidently he wants to know something about it. So why are you watching the show?
Well,
That's what I'm saying. Why are you watching it?
Martin Luther King said, "Nothing in the world more dangerous than sincere ignorance and conscientious stupidity." You want to not know what them took place.
He wants to know, Jerry. He would not be watching the show. He's pretending like he doesn't want to know. And when it's like a child, or an adult, when they face the truth, it hurts. And so they don't want to know. That's just like with CRT. They don't want to teach this in school because the same thing. Someone's feeling gets hurt. And then it's, oh, wow, someone's feeling sorry, we can't teach it.
But it's better than that feeling get hurt than we have to live under these conditions that have been imposed upon us from the time we set foot on these shores. So I'm not concerned about his feeling or anybody else that don't want to hear the truth about what have taken place in the country.
Yeah, because everything was said, go Google it, look it up, find it, it's history. Vernon?
Yes. I think, my theory is, always got to say, and I said always is three sides to the story, your side, my side, and the truth. And one thing I learned over the years, and when I was in the military, I used to teach race relations. And that's one of the things that I found out during all of those seminars. And once you sit people down and you start talking about the issues, and sometimes you can find some common ground because I found that the people that had the most radical ideas just only getting it from one side,
right,
from their position. But then when they hear other people to the other side of it, and it didn't affect everybody, but it did affect some people that said, okay, now I hear both sides of the story. And now I understand, just like the worst racist you can come across, there's a reason why he or she is a racist, okay? And so, but you got to hear them out to understand what their position is. And sometimes you can clarify their position because the position is not always right, and they're always rooted into other stuff. What I found out, and it's just like what I see in this country today, rather than people doing their own research and finding out information, they're comfortable with taking on other people's ideas, taking on other people's thoughts, and just following what other people tell them. They don't want to when you tell me something, Carol, as much as I love you, I trust you, but I might fact check you, okay? I just very well might fact check to see if your information is accurate and correct. And that's what we talk about with this. A lot of folks are so, it's not that they're bad. Some people are not so bad people, but they have just been taught bad, okay?
That's what I said.
And they need, and that's why this issue about race, it should be a national dialogue, okay? So that we can understand each other. And one of the things I will tell you, we were never in this country, they try to say in this country that we are a melting pot, okay? The concept of a melting pot where you put all in, it's just like a blender. You know how you put everything into a blender?
We are a melting pot, we're just not treated equally.
Well, no, we're not. Well, hold on, Bill.
Well, they come from everywhere. There's a lot of different nationalities here. That makes it a melting pot, but we're still not treated equally.
Let me explain the concept. The idea of it's truly a melting pot for white people, but it's not truly a melting pot for Black people. And let me tell you why. And I want you to just in your mind's eye, just follow my imagination for a minute, and just think about a blender. All the fruits that you put into a blender, right? And you put apples and everything into a blender. Once you blend that thing up, and then it comes out with one common taste. You can't tell an apple from a pear, from a lettuce or anything because it blends in. Well, in the United States of America, when people immigrated in this country, most folks like the Polish and the Irish and all those folks are white people. The only difference between them was a language barrier. That's the only way you would know the difference between a regular, what I call, I'm just using this as an example, what I call a regular white person, of what they call them American. No, I'm talking about a American that's American, not one that's coming from Europe, because all kinds of white people came from Europe.
Right.
But when they immigrated into this country, okay, because if they kept their mouth closed, you wouldn't know a Polish from anybody else.
Right.
You think about it, you read your history again, even they was even discriminated against, okay?
Mhm.
But one thing that they had going for themselves was the fact that they were white. And then the only thing they had to do was learn the language, okay? And then they melted. That's where the concept of the melting pot comes in. They melted into the environment, and you couldn't tell, once they learned the English language here, you couldn't tell the Polish from anybody else, you know what I'm saying? Just not on sight. But with Black people, it's a little bit different when the melting pot came in, because once a Black person, you put them in there, and I can bet you one thing: if you put something Black in that blender, you're gonna change the whole concept of that blender. Same thing with Black people when they immigrated in this country. We just couldn't learn the language. But once we learned the language, we were still Black. Once we learned everything else, we were still Black. So we pointed out, so we was there, we still different from everybody else. So anything that's different tends to make you discriminate against them.
Right.
Okay, now, my concept is, rather than this country is a melting pot, I think this country is more like a salad bowl. Okay, what make a great salad? When you get all these ingredients into a salad, right? And you get apples, and you get lettuces, and you get the same ingredients you put in that blender. If you put it into a bowl, okay, you can still and then you can mix all of your ingredients in that, your salad dressing in that bowl. But when you eat in that salad, when you bite into a piece of lettuce, you know it's a lettuce. When you bite into a piece of apple, you know it's an apple. And so the same thing with this country. We all are different people from all different parts of the world, and we're not going to change. We got to know that. We just have to learn to respect that. This is not a true melting pot. It's a salad bowl. It's a multicultural society in the United States of America. People got to get used to it. It's not a true melting pot, and so that's my little take on it.
Well, you know, Vernon, the thing about it, we were brought here against our will, and to be treated to this day the way we are treated is absolutely asinine in how they have treated us. Still, we're still slaves in a nation that said it abolished slavery, where hundreds of thousands of Black men and women are in prison for something minor. Because when they came out, the prison blew up after slavery because of convict leasing laws, vagrancy laws. You looked at somebody funny, you could be put in prison. You bumped into somebody, you could be put in prison, and then leased out to some farmer that was treating you worse than when you was in slavery, because they had to be responsible for you. But now they don't have to be responsible, because the state is responsible for you, and they can lease you out. And it's people went into coal mines and never came out. It's people that's been in prison for life. And, only through the Innocent Project, many of them was freed because of something they didn't do. Just the whole gamut. The people lynched for years in this country, been lynched, hung from trees for no reason. Somebody having a picnic while they lynching people and burning them and they're crawling up trees trying to get out of the fire, when they cut their arms off so they couldn't do it, so they can watch them. The most cruel stuff that has ever happened to any people happened right here in America to us and all over the world. And it's all because of white racism, people that think they are a supreme or have a superior knowledge than we do, when they know they don't.
Okay.
And
But why do you think that this guy called and was upset because you're talking about Black history? What made him so angry that he said we should stop teaching about slavery? Explain that to me. Why are you angry about it? Why are you angry about it?
That's the same person to quickly utter Russ is right but they want to quickly tell us to get over it. Maria Shabazz says, I think sometimes they listen because we always invite the conversation. We're always wanting common ground, but in that common ground, we are often found wavering and not speaking straight words. There is no need for my side, your side, and the truth when you're speaking straight words. The actual fact, in actual fact, there is only truth. Maria Shabazz from
and that's what got me, because he was mad. Stop talking about slavery. Stop talking about Jews. Stop talking about it.
Yeah, because they don't want you to think.
But that's uncomfortable. That's just uncomfortable for them to hear.
Yes.
It's a part of that white guilt. You know, he probably felt real guilty about it because he know a lot of it is true.
But
they don't have to. They don't want to have to face and the guilt about it. So if you don't talk about it, then they don't have to worry about it. And so that's probably why he was angry. But if he were to listen, then maybe he could learn something, and maybe it could happen because
I think if he had called up without being agitated and say, okay, explain to me why, whatever, we could have talked and had a conversation. That's what I showed, a community conversation. But don't call up hostile and tell us what we need to stop talking about.
Jefferson say, I tremble. Jefferson say, I tremble, for I know God is just. And they trembling. See, God is just. Truth gonna come out. Martin Luther King was right. Truth crushed the earth, gonna rise again in this country and all over the world. Jefferson also said, all men are created equal. A slaveholder, George Washington, a general in the military would fought alongside free black men, slave owner. We have to confront this issue in its most graphic terms. We can't sugarcoat it, and we will not sugarcoat it. Not here.
Can I just say, I love these opportunities. I wish the man hadn't gotten disconnected or hung up, because I love it. I just want to say to the man who called, thank you. We realize you're a fan. We will be here next Sunday at the same time. So if you'd like to call in and shout some more, I'm happy to orate and discuss and shout back with you, because I live for these moments. I won't even say I love making white people feel uncomfortable in their own spaces. So if you'd like to have a conversation, please, I welcome you doing it.
Yeah, we welcome to call in.
Come on back. Call on back. And then tell us what you want us to talk about, since you don't want us to talk about slavery and stuff that is relevant to Black people, not only Black people in our community, but people in totality in our community. What would you like us to talk about? Please.
One of the things I think you're right, and we should invite them back, and anybody back that have a different point of view.
Absolutely.
We need to understand why they have that point of view. Just like we got our point of view, and then they need to sit down and listen to it to understand why we have our. I never forget. I had a show one time because I never understood why a Black person would support Trump. Okay, and I had an interview, but I wasn't. It wasn't an anti thing, but I just want to understand from their perspective why they would want to support Trump. And I said, and then they had some valid reasons in their mind. I didn't agree with the reasons, but I don't have to agree. But what we have to do is understand where they're coming from.
Absolutely.
And once we understand where we're coming from, we might not agree. And the old saying about we can agree to disagree, but let's have common respect for each other. And when I finished the conversation with that person, I wasn't putting him down anymore because I thought it was stupid to support Trump. But I sincerely understood where he was coming from. I didn't agree with it. He had been brainwashed about the rhetoric that Trump pushed and everything. And that was his position. And and that's truly what he believed in. And so I wasn't going to put him down for what he really believes in. But when you tell them, when you try to enlighten them with facts, and they don't want to accept facts, and then you can no longer conversate with them because that's what they believe. And if they truly believe that, it's just like, I just can't understand in this country what I call the groupthink. And when people get behind a cult personality, I can't understand why a person would follow a cult leader. I couldn't understand why Jim Jones was able to talk 1,000 people from California to go to the jungle to kill themselves, and people followed them and did it. I just don't understand that. But you gotta also, that's on one hand, but on the other hand, we follow people, and this is not a disparagement on the preachers or anything, but we follow preachers. That's what you in religion. You got a whole group of people. The pastor can get up there and say anything he wants, and he can say anything he wants. We'll lead him, we'll follow him blindly down Primrose Path. And so that'll give you some idea about what people would think. But my position on that is that I think people like, we don't call them people, we call them sheepers. They like to be led by people. They don't want to do their own critical thinking. They don't want to have to evaluate their own lives and own situation and come up with their own conclusion. It's so easy for them to have somebody to make decisions for them, and they just follow them down Primrose Path if it need be. But unfortunately, that is the nature of what we run into in this country and even around the world when we got cultural personality. But how do we cut across that? I don't know how do we do that, except for educating people and sit down and try to talk one-on-one. Yes, sir.
One of the things you have to understand is they don't want you to learn. They don't want to know, and they don't want you to know. They don't want our children to know. They don't want our future generations to know.
That might be true. They might not want, but they don't. But Jerry, you know what the beauty of that is? They don't control me. They can't tell me what I don't know. And that's why I say we got to do our own research.
Right.
They might not want me to do it. That's fine. But that's fine, because I'm going to find out on my own. I'm not going to sit there and wait for you to spoon feed me. Right. That's what people are going to do.
But that's what I'm talking about. They don't want you to even do the research and find out. That's why critical race theory is something they are telling people, you be afraid of. Be very afraid of black folks.
Jerry. Trust me. Wait a minute, Jerry. Trust me on this. They don't give a damn about what you want to know. They don't want other white people to know. That's the problem. They don't want to educate other white people on that, because they think that once they understand the real history of it, then they're gonna sympathize with us. Okay.
Right, but that's what I'm saying. If we are not teaching our children, future generations, about what's going on, then they will not know, and the people that they have to confront will not know. So it is critical that we teach ourselves, our children, and unborn generations coming up on this planet what took place, why we're in the condition we are, why we are at the bottom of the well when it comes to finance, why we're at the bottom of the well when it comes to housing, why we don't have land in the country. All of these things are results of white supremacy and white ideology. And we have to let them know that we're gonna teach this. We're gonna tell the truth about this, because it is incumbent upon us. And yeah, it's gonna take groups of us to teach and to put our resources together and to do what needs to be done to make sure these things happen.
But if we don't have a real conversation, so the guy that called, if he's willing to call back next week and talk to us, without the anger, get your anger over with right now. If you're really concerned about what we're talking about, if you're really saying we should talk about something else, tell us what that something else is, so we can try to see what you're talking about. And you can share, just like Derek said. But let's invite him back on, because we want to hear his point of view, so then we can share our point of view.
Karen, unfortunately, that's what I'm saying. That's why we need to sit down and have a conversation with each other. Because just like you're saying that he should call back not being angry, in his point of view, he think we're angry. We just angry black people. And so, but we're not angry. We're just taking the point. And he may not have been angry, but he just might not be. He just may be uninformed or uneducated about what.
He was more frustrated about the fact that we were talking about our history and about the holiday and about slavery and about the 4th of July, because he says, stop talking about it.
If anybody should be angry in this country, it should be black people.
Jerry,
We have been mistreated in this country to this day. If anybody should be angry, it should be us.
right. Jerry Lowe on our Facebook stream says the racist incidents toward African Americans are so egregious and frequent that I don't believe we will ever know all of the violations. We stated that on last week, but Maria Shabazz says he called upset because he was given the opportunity. If we have these conversations among ourselves and unite our and pool our resources and just work and move out ourselves and making our own communities a safe and decent place to live, then the mindset loses its power. K. Moo Kamal says, get with me and let's frame our struggle about the right of self-determination. Yes,
absolutely,
indeed.
absolutely. Well, let's move on quickly because I want to talk about Biden and the loan forgiveness. You know, the Senate, I think, passed the $10 billion COVID package, but it didn't have to have the global part to it. And the Biden administration is very upset over it because they're saying that if the global part is missing, then what's going to happen is COVID is going to stay in the United States because the poor individuals and the poor countries, they're going to continue to get these viruses. And if they get them, it's coming over here. So what is your opinion, Emery? I'm talking about COVID and I'm talking about the forgiveness program at the same time. But that's the two topics I want to talk about. The forgiveness program, the $10 billion. What do you think about that in regards to the fact that, I'm right, the COVID part of the global COVID part is not in there. And also, about the student loan forgiveness program, which is $10,000 has been passed by the Senate. Either one of those y'all can tackle.
Well, like I've always stated, I think $10,000. If I owe you $100 grand, if you forgive me $10,000, I'm grateful for it. I take something is better than nothing. So that's always been my stance on that.
No one has changed their stance. I know. I can't remember what Vernon said.
Vernon and his
$50,000.
Don't forgive me the 10.
By now, has it changed? Has any viewpoint? Because he said in July or August he's going to make a statement. It's going to be 10,000 up to 50,000. Again, we've got to discuss what's going to happen if it's less than $50,000. And Biden acts like he's not really, he's just kind of.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not talking about old though. I'm saying he's not bringing the urgency to it. That's why the urgency is not there. And the student forgiveness expires August 31st, if I'm not mistaken. So we only talk about 2 months, and he's got to do something soon. And if y'all saying $10,000 and the students are going to turn that down, do you think that's going to happen? We're talking about August 31st. These people have to pay that money back.
Start back to paying, yeah.
That's right.
With $10,000 saved off of it, that should knock the payment down a little bit, depending on what your debt is.
Derek, you're not happy about it, are you?
No, I mean, it's not going to knock the debt down any. I mean, if you're in school, if you are a millennial or was a Gen Z, I guess if there are Gen Z people who are in college right now.
Well, we're talking about the ones that owe it already.
Yeah, but that's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm saying. Those people who have just recently graduated,
right?
They're not going to do. It's not going to do anything for those individuals. Even when we talk about states, the state university school system. If we look at it in Florida, average tuition plus room and board for a university, for the state university system is going on an average of $10,000 to $12,000 on an annualized. So that's not going to do much to help anybody on that regard. I hope that they do something a little different. And I hope he does. Even if he moves to the needle to 25, I think that would do something in terms of helping students out, specifically focusing on their undergraduate studies, not necessarily doing anything for those that are postdoctoral and things of that nature. But certainly it would go a long way to those folks at that standpoint. But
can we take 10,000 now, take it in increments? Can we tell Biden we'll take $10,000 now, and then we keep, take another 15,000 until we get to 50,000?
I think would you take the 10? I think if you take the 10,000 now, that's all you're gonna get.
Okay.
I don't think I think you say, well, you got 10,000. Let's call it a wrap. We're gonna did this issue and move on to the next. That's the way I think it's gonna be the outcome. So I wouldn't be as inclined to take the 10. I do think there's always a possibility, but I don't think that's what it's gonna be.
Okay, we'll see.
Derek is right about, because that's the way government works. Usually if they give something once, they're not going to do anything again. So I can see why the young people feel the way they do. This country said that you in order to move forward in the country, you had to have a good education, and so we are the only country, I believe, that in the Western world where we have a so-called democracy. Is why students have to pay that kind of money to go to school, except in countries where you go to these other elite schools and then private school, then you have to pay. But a regular public education is free in most Western democracy. And here in America, where the richest country on the planet Earth, quote, financially can't take care of its students, that's gonna make the money in the future, they got to suffer. When they come out of college, many of them $100,000 and $200,000 in debt. But this is what America say: in order to be a doctor, or be an attorney, to be engineers and all that, you got to go and borrow that kind of money, especially if your family not wealthy. And and many dentists and all of that, they still owe money. People working to they die and still owe money after they're dead. It's killing the economy.
Well, Jerry, the problem with that now is that's what you get with the capitalistic society. That's what money makes money. But people, because you have to borrow the money, it's big business that run this country, and only only 10% of the wealth in this country that controls everything. Okay, that's what all the money is. And that's if you didn't have that, if you didn't have those student loans, then that'll put folks in their heads. They'll make less money. And let me tell you this, and that's why I believe that they frown on quote socialism, which was a lot of it going on anyway. But because the top 10% of the people that got the money feel like they're going to have to foot the bill. That's why you got that. And so they don't want everything else. And so with the state system, I believe that the college education in this country should be from kindergarten through your first 4 years of education. I believe that should be free.
It should be.
That. And if you want to go to if you want to borrow some money to go to a private school, then that's on you. But with a state-run school, I believe that it should be absolutely free. And but the powers to be in this what we call this capitalistic society, y'all, that's the problem, because it's about making money. And the more folks that makes money, and only but a few of them that really makes mega money in this country, and because they make mega money, they're not going to allow the 90% to do anything else to control, to dip into all that wealth that they got. So
well, when you hit on something when you talk about socialism. Going to school, and from the 1 through 12th grade is socialism. Getting Social Security is socialism. Highways and bridges that came from socialism. Everybody throw in something to get it. City government, state government, The United States government is socialism because we all pay into a pot through our taxes and all of that to make sure from the day that we work, we pay taxes till we file our income taxes and we pay more taxes on the money that but that's socialism. But they tell you that it's a capitalist society, but it's a capitalist society as long as there's poor people and middle class people. Socialism go to the top 10% because they get the tax breaks. They don't pay any taxes, and many of them. They don't have to. They can get, they can buy a plane and write it off. They can buy a big yacht, write it off. They can buy 18 houses, write them off. You can be a billion. You can make $100 billion and not pay one dime in taxes. So no, their socialism is to the rich. Capitalism is for the poor.
Hey, Jerry, that's one thing they didn't holler when big companies got in trouble, when the government bailed them out. You didn't hear them talking about socialism.
That's socialism, right?
But that was socialism with government giving you money to bail
money.
out.
With our money,
we bailed them out.
Yeah, we bailed them.
Yeah.
Exactly. But you didn't hear them talking about we don't want this capital, we don't want this socialistic money. I'll turn it back. No, but they took it.
No, socialism didn't matter about socialism. See, that's what I'm saying. Socialism is to the top people in the country. Capitalism is for us.
Yeah. Hey, Candace, Candace signing one Muhammad says on our Facebook stream, should we pay for subpar education?
Yeah.
And that's what we've been paying for a long time. Yeah, and she's absolutely right.
That's what we've been doing.
And because when we used to build schools and stuff, when we built cities and towns, we had schools that were teaching skills and all of that. They burned them to the ground. 60 cities. Then on top of that, from 1919 to 1921, it was a purge. They not only did they burn them to the ground, they called them riots. They were massacred. They were massacring Black people. It put the fear of God in them, ran us off the land. We are still dealing. But I think what the sister is telling us, we're gonna have to come together and do what we need to do to make sure that we have quality education.
One last thing before we go, with all of the hearings that's on in regards to January 6th, is there something, are you looking at the hearings, and is there something that's
lock him up, lock him up, lock him up, lock him up, lock him up?
Well, that ain't gonna happen.
Did you hear anything that really amazed you or kind of threw you, to the wayside?
Well, when it comes to 45, absolutely nothing amazes me. But it was a good news spotter that the girl said this man tried to strangle the Secret Service agent, and she ain't lying. All you got to do is but they don't want the truth. That guy assaulted that Secret Service agent, and the Secret Service agents are so willing to go before Congress and lie. So it just makes no absolute zero sense. But all they have to do is apologize to that young lady, and I'm sure she'll pass with flying honors.
But they've been sworn to secrecy, and that's why in order for them, the Secret Service to continue to moving forward in the future and stay, Secret Service, they not gonna tell what was done to them. Except when the only reason when President Obama, they got caught in this hotel drunk and left the president unprotected. That's the only time you heard any little criticism. They shut that down real fast. They left the president.
They call the Secret Service for nothing, Jerry.
I know. Yeah.
So what do you think's gonna come out of this January 6th hearing? What's the end point? And tell me about what's Garland, attorney, what is his name?
Merrick Garland.
Yeah, Merrick Garland.
Merrick Garland. Tell me about him. Is he going to do anything? Because it's going to his hands, right? So why isn't he doing anything?
Because they like they said, it's the same bird with the same broken wings on both sides. Neither one of them gonna fly.
Hey, Jerry.
But they're afraid to start putting presidents in jail because they're afraid it's going to happen to the next one for something frivolous. But the thing about it, this guy tried to overthrow this government.
That's right.
He should be under the jail. He should never even be seeing daylight right now. He should be in prison. Him and his minions.
But he could run for president again in 2024. The same man that we're hearing all this stuff about can be the president in 2024. Does that scare you?
I think Merrick Garland. I'm holding out hope for Merrick Garland like I'm holding out hope for Biden. I think that he eventually going to do his job, but obviously they can't advertise what they're doing. We'll have to wait and see what happens. At the end of the day, when he doesn't do anything, then we can criticize him. But right now, I think it's a little premature.
Well, but see, Barry, if the Republican win the Senate and the House, just by chance, hopefully they don't.
Really,
hopefully they don't.
They're saying what
they're gonna shut it down, and he's gonna be out there talking about "I wished," singing a Stevie Wonder song.
I already told you what they're gonna do if they win the Senate. They
already told you. They're turning over everything.
Vernon is the most optimistic man I have ever met in my life.
Yeah, I know, right?
I got hope.
You
for
do,
America.
Vernon.
I was like, I'll always agree with you.
Vernon, I promise you got it, brother. You got it.
Can I just say, to answer your question, for me, it was my if nothing else, I took back my takeaway was from the testimonies of Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss, the individual poll workers from the state of Georgia, and how their lives have been impacted.
Right.
I don't know that I knew to that extent how they had been damaged by his lies and how his targeting impacted. It was sad. It's tragic to see, and it's sad to put a face to see the face to the hate that's in the what can occur from the vitriol and the hate mongering that this man has spewed. It was unfortunate, but to me, like, if that doesn't tell you how big of a lie the big lie was, and how January 6th impacted us, there's really not a conversation that one can have, that I think that could impart that ways. And I did want to just quickly veer to your earlier subject about the COVID. Yes, it is unfortunate that they have left global funding out, because we will continue to continue on in this pandemic as we have before. And I want to just congratulate our dumbass governor, Ron DeSantis, because it is through his tactics that has moved the state of Florida and the #1 state in the nation. In cases, we have surpassed the state of California. We have surpassed Texas, and we still don't have any vaccines for those babies going on, because he still won't order them. So congratulations, kudos to that done.
Yeah, the at-home test he won't order, so the health departments don't have any. The vaccines for the children he won't. And then I heard yesterday, I think.
2 minutes, Carol.
Okay, on the news was that Escambia County has 800 new COVID cases.
We are that when I kept telling the uptake is on the uptake. The uptake is on the uptake. And remember, if you don't recall, I said by end of June, July, we will see sky high numbers. We're starting to see them, and they're coming through. So
it's time to go now, because I'm hearing firecrackers already out here, and I want to make it with the firecrackers, not nothing else. But we're gonna go. Wonderful show. We enjoyed it. Please, everyone, Jared, your books real quickly. 1 minute.
From the project to the boardroom, Mr. Bill Snow, who is sitting there, we want to recommend this book. Also, The Visions of Black Men. This is by Dr. Naeem Akbar. The Bridal Files by Dr. Agent Hildreth. And this another one by Dr. Asa G. Hildreth, Know Thyself. These are great books. And the last one, The Black Holocaust. We would like for you to get and read. They are not real large, thick books, but they are really great reads.
What about the book that you have on Nat Turner, Yeah.
Oh yeah, I got some on that.
I'm not turning
Fredrick
Douglas is what I'm
Yeah,
talking about.
this Fredrick Douglas. I got 3 or 4 books, different kinds on Fredrick Douglass by different writers and who wrote about Fredrick Douglass. So want to make sure that you see it, get the book.
All right, y'all. Anything else to say? We've got 1 minute left.
Yeah, read those books, Mr. Angry Caller. We look forward to hearing from you next week.
We look forward
know
to
you
hearing
watch.
from you. Please calm down a little bit and just tell us what you think. We want to hear what you think. 100 years of lynching. That's another conversation.
Yeah,
So
we're gonna talk about that too.
we'll talk about that too. So caller, if you know, I know you're watching us, you're looking at us, and so you are learning something. And it's just hitting that nerve a little bit. But we have a conversation about it and see how we can come to an agreement or understanding.
Gotta go, Carol.
All right then. Brother said we have to go.
This has been a community conversation. We want to thank everybody for watching. Good night.
Good night,
Good night,
everybody.
everybody.
Good night.